There is a saying, once finished, a book begins. And so it seems like it's been 7 years, John, but it's only been 2 years since I self-published a book called Without Regrets, A Nurse's Advice About Aging and Dying. So let me just read to you a tiny bit about what I say about why I wrote this book. The content in this book is inspired by my family and my husband's family, two very different families living very different scenarios and making very different choices at the end of life. Mabel, my mother, was a farm woman. Isabel, David's mother, was a Canadian aristocrat. My mother had presence of mind until the very end of her life. David's mother had dementia for several years. My father didn't believe in science or medicine. He was a Baptist minister in the state of Oklahoma. David's father was a surgeon in the state of Oklahoma. David and I did not anticipate becoming responsible for the care of our aging parents. Who among us thinks of old age, dying, or closure in the middle of building a career and a family? Who is clear-sighted enough to realize that just as we are beginning to hit our stride, our elders are slowing down, their biological clocks ticking away, and their health status changing? But as the Emmott children grew up, so our parents aged, and we spent the next decade caring for our family and making decisions. The responsibilities were often overwhelming. Though our professions, I'm a nurse ethicist and David is a physician, focus on teaching others to make healthcare decisions, we had to learn firsthand the challenges involved in helping our parents and families imagine and live the final chapters of their lives. Early in the experience, I began to see that other couples and most families will, sooner or later, encounter the same challenges and need to build the same expertise, though each family must find its own way. This book grew out of my desire to share the benefits and insights that we gained along the way. We learned many lessons from each other, from other family members, and from our friends and patients who also shared their stories with us. As we continue to reflect on our experience, talk with friends, and work with other professionals doing end-of-life planning, we realize how important it is to engage one another in this conversation. In our decade of caring, we did some things well, some things not so well. We fell down at times, but we always got back up. We tried to hold dear and respect the lives of our loved ones. We tried to accept and help them accept the inevitable losses that accompany extreme age and frailty, and to tread on with courage. So this book was not written to give you perfect solutions. I hope that by reading this book, you will be better prepared than David and I were to become caregivers, companions, and comforters for your loved ones. I hope that your experience with frail or dying family members or friends will not be so burdensome that you become sick or that your family comes undone. But mostly, I hope that you will learn to make decisions with and for your loved ones with confidence. When you begin to look back on this process, I hope that you will be able to do so without regrets. So the last 2 years have served really as my becoming a student of the very words that I wrote. David and I really wrote this because we faced so many difficult decisions over a decade that we thought we learned some tricks of the trade and let's pass them forward. What I have since learned after focusing on aging parents is that there is a broad spectrum of a population in the United States that looks for guidance in difficult decision making. 3 cohort groups that I've learned about in the last 2 years, and some of you in this room and here in Kansas City have friends that I know as well who are experiencing difficult decision making as grandparents who are possibly even over 70, who have serious illness, but are also raising their grandchildren. So that's one cohort group that I've become acquainted with frequently in the last 2 years. Women my age and older who are caring for spouses who are in their 80s. So women who were 40, 45, and 50 who married men 15 to 20 years older and are now caring for men who have serious illness, frailty, and dementia who are in their 80s. So that's another population. Also, parents my age and older who are caring for adult children who have cancer. So that's another population. So as I've gone, probably in the last 2 years, I've given probably more than 30 talks on the book and on the topic of making difficult decisions and what you can do to anticipate what those might look like. I also have helped my very own sister-in-law die from ovarian cancer. And Myra has shared a lot of that with me in the last few years. So my experience as a professional, but also personally, has grown to a different group than just caring for aging parents. 2 stories. I thought about this morning. I was at 5:45 yoga this morning. I tried to get Deborah to come with me, but no, she wouldn't come. 5:45 yoga with Myra's daughter, BK. And at the end, we do a meditation. And I was really thinking I was just asking for guidance on what I should talk about today, because really in Kansas City, I'm not the expert. I'm in front of the experts who grew me. So it's a little bit more challenging when I'm here. I can go down to Texas and feel very confident, and I can go out to California and feel like I'm my own person. But here, these people raised me. They grew me. So I'm looking at a lot of my mentors. But I thought that what I would do is I would tell you 2 stories. One where I was called as a professional and as a consultant to kind of think about what a process might be, and then one that is a recent and current and ongoing family situation. The first story I want to tell you is and then I want to ask you, because both had chosen proxies or healthcare durable power of attorneys. Those were in place, and both had conversations. But it's that unanticipated, critical decision-making that is just so challenging. And what can we do as healthcare professionals, or even larger than that, what can we do as fellow human beings to make this experience better? How can we reach out, and how can we be better? So I'll tell you a story about Kay and Jack. And John, don't let me go on too long, because, you know, I learned from the best how to go on. So Kay was in her 40s and was a TV executive in New York City. And when she was 45, she had divorced a brilliant man who had a PhD in neuroscience and had been not quite they had not had the life she had expected. So as she went into the city each day to her executive job, who should she fall in love with but her bus driver? So Kay and Jack court, and they marry, and Kay is 45, and at the time Jack was 61. Jack was a loud guy with a ponytail, tattoos, and drove a Harley. And Kay loved their life that they spent together. Jack eventually retired from this public transportation system and didn't have a great retirement, but he retired. And Kay worked and they planned together what their financial situation would have to be for them to finally leave the big city and move to Arizona, where it would be warm and they could have a wonderful life together. So Kay worked until she was 65, and Jack would be how old? 81. So they moved to Phoenix just a couple of years ago, and she knew that Jack was experiencing memory problems, but she didn't really understand the extent of that until they changed locations. And that really precipitated what would become early dementia and now advanced dementia. So she was one of 3 girls, and all 3 girls are actually married to older men, and none had children. Their mom died when the girls were probably in their 50s. Their dad remarried and is currently 95 years old. So Kay is in Arizona, and she has a sister in Kansas City and a sister in Oklahoma. And she is trying to care for Jack in their home, and she is worn out. and she starts doing research on how she can get help. And what she realizes is that their retirement was very financially fragile, and that anything that would not be covered by Medicare would be very hard for them to afford. So she calls one sister, and one sister comes out and looks at the situation and helps her and tries to help her with Jack, and realizes this is pretty tough. And that's where a phone call came to me. They went through process that you and I and all of us who are professionals in the field would know to do. Call a geriatric social worker, assess the situation, see if the home is safe, blah, blah, blah. On and on, all those things we know to do. Then she's worn out again, and another sister goes out to visit, and she says, Kay, I don't think you can do this. His sleep cycle is very disturbed. He's very agitated. He's a very big guy. Kay is very tiny. The whole situation is getting out of hand, and it's based on what they thought had been a great retirement plan. So her second sister says to her, who is a CPA, looks at all the finances, and they try to figure out what would be the best thing to do. How could we get him qualified for more care in the state of Arizona? Should he really be someplace other than home, et cetera, et cetera. So Kay can't deal with a stranger taking care of Jack because this is the love of her life, even though she's reaching a point where she really can't care for him. So who should fly out to Arizona and try to help with the situation? The 95-year-old father. Kay's 95-year-old father flies to Arizona, spends 3 days, looks at the situation, and sits his daughter down and says to her, this is no way for you to live, and this is no place for Jack to be. And so only after her own 95-year-old father went out did she look and find a place where Jack could be, where she could see him each day. So there's one story of where she took this book, she looked at it, she made sure early on that she was not only the wife but the proxy. She looked at what they should have conversations about, but who would have really anticipated the financial implications and just the psychological distress of having the husband that you love and adore change so rapidly and then be in a place that's not in your home. So there's one story. Then another story, which is a personal story, and then I'd like to ask you a few questions. As I say in the book, I'm one of 10 children. I'm the 8th. So I have sisters who are more like a grandparent's age. My mother and father, the book is a lot about my mother, who died at the age of 95 6 years ago. So I have sisters who are in their late 70s, and one actually who's the same age as Rosemary Flanagan, which I always love that and would think about that. So a few of my older sisters have already lost their children. One had an only child who died at the age of 50. One had a child who died in a motorcycle accident, and her other son of leukemia. So I have 2 older sisters who have no children now. I have a sister who had breast cancer about 8 years ago, and they did not know when they did her lumpectomy that she also had sarcoidosis. So my sister, Tricia, and her husband, Larry, grew up and adopted a Native American Indian in the state of Oklahoma in a small town, and not knowing that this child had fetal alcohol syndrome. And this was more than 20 years ago. They owned a small country western store where they made the big belt buckles with your initials on them, and of course we all got those for Christmas, etc. But Larry and Patricia, over time, Larry was a cowboy. He was literally a rodeoer. That's how my sister met him. Owned the store, of course, couldn't compete with the Sheplers and the Cavenders or whatever they're called, and eventually closed those stores. And as they grew older and raised their daughter, who had significant problems, my sister worked in an industry where she did general management in a car industry. And Larry cleaned office carpets at night. and that's how they made their living. So Patricia gets breast cancer and has a substantial open wound that fails to heal. And lots of things are tried. And eventually she gets some disability and she's at home. And now, 8 years later, she's been at home for a while, for a long time, and is fairly limited to their home. We tease her, and she doesn't mind, and we say, how's the chair life? Because she basically lives in a chair. She's very obese, and she has a wound that's not healed. And at times they had insurance, and at times they did not. And we looked forward to a time when she would have Medicare benefits, and there were trials of skin grafts, which did not take. And so there's the story. Tricia and Larry, great people, hardworking people, who now are raising their own granddaughter. Their daughter is troubled and has issues, and they have little Emmy, who now is probably in about 3rd grade. So a few weeks ago, Tricia has severe abdominal problems, and she ends up in the hospital. And they can't diagnose it, but they finally do exploratory surgery, and they find an ischemic bowel, remove 14 inches of it, and find out that she has some cancer. And but she's going to be, tell her she's going to be fine. So she's on a ventilator, and she weighs over 300 pounds, and she is in poor health and is weak because of her lifestyle. So what would happen a week later is that she cannot be taken off the ventilator. She's too weak, she's too large, she's too whatever. So Larry, my brother-in-law, who still calls me Helen Melissa, which nobody even in the room probably knows that's my middle name, Helen Melissa. So he's been in my family forever, since I was a young girl, and he knows my husband well. So he calls us and says, Helen Melissa, I need to talk to you and the doctor. This here surgeon came by, and he wants to put a trach in Trish and a feeding tube and send her to a rehab center in Oklahoma City. And that's a couple hours from here, And I'm scared. I'm real scared about that. And I just flat told him that I had to call my sister-in-law and my brother-in-law, and they weren't to do anything until I got back with them. And so David and I spend a lot of time on the phone with Larry, and we ask him if, because of HIPAA, if he will add us to her records as somebody who can have her information. And the physician, the primary care physician, calls us. He is wonderful. He goes over everything with us, and we all agree that the goal would not be to send her far away from her spouse, and because he would have to choose between her and the 8-year-old. That's all there is to take care of these 2 women. And that really she deserved more time to come off the ventilator, and what could we do to make her strong? How could this be handled? And so TPN. We get her on TPN. We try some more extubation processes, but we all feel better. On one particular day, however, the surgeon comes in. And what do you think the surgeon says to Larry after the 4 days of peace and feeling like we're all on the same page? We're going to try to trach her tomorrow, and we're going to try to get that feeding tube in, and we're going to be sending her to either Wichita Falls or Oklahoma City, and you need to make your choice. So Big Cowboy Larry is all upset again. When Larry called, I said, Larry, you get to say to the surgeon what you said to the first primary care doctor. You get to say that's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is a Patricia who can come home, not a Patricia who goes to a rehab center. And there are indications, and I wouldn't want to be accusatory, but that we have a poor woman, and we have someone who's very obese, and we have someone with a complex case. And so I'm not sure that he was treated as someone who could weigh risk and benefits and make a decision. I think he was pretty much read the right act. This is how it's going to go. So I talked to Larry, and he goes, okay, I'm writing it all down. That's what I'm going to say. And so on 2 days later, on Monday, of this week, he texted me and said, well, hell, she pulled the tube out. She's breathing fine. Her oxygen level is good. And, of course, being from Oklahoma and having a father who was a Baptist minister, all the texts from all my siblings were, very religious-oriented. Prayers are answered. Thank you, prayer warriors, blah, 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 on and on. Regardless of whether it was prayer warriors or it was just my sister was tired of the tube and she could breathe on her own and she had been given that time that she needed, there was this blessing for this family. So I tell you those two stories because those are the stories, professionally and personally, that inspire me. And those are the stories that make up this book. And those are the stories that have inspired me to connect everything that I've learned about bioethics and everything I know as a sister and as a daughter and as a mother and a friend and say to others, there is this human experience that can be lifted up and treated with dignity that cannot be prescribed and cannot be ignored if we in this room continue to sit and talk and listen about compassion and about doing the right thing. So I tell you those two stories because I was inspired at my yoga class to tell you those two stories. And I ask you, if we don't have time, and maybe we'll just talk about it after the next presentation, but to think about how we, as family members, whether we're the daughter or the sister, not the nurse or the doctor or the social worker or the chaplain or the PhD bioethicist, but how we can make sure that stories like these have the best ending that they can have. Because there are parts of those stories that we own and that we can be a part of.